Um, but I want to start with why it's so important to study the signs before the Day of Judgment. And I think being alive at this day and age, we don't need to go into this for a very long time, because if you're alive today, you kind of understand why it's so important to understand the signs before the Day of Judgment. But it was interesting, like somewhere around 15 years ago or something, there was a class, a very detailed class on the signs before the Day of Judgment. And it was very beneficial. It was an excellent class that we were attending with one of the mashayikh in our area. And I remember a lot of people used to object and say, look, why study this? And it's not important, and there are many other important issues. I mean, first of all, the argument of there are many other important issues, it's not a valid argument, because that would mean we cannot study or do anything, because if I'm going to give a talk on this subject, well, Tawheed is more important. I'm going to give a talk on the other subject, Salah is more important. But people couldn't understand why it's so relevant. But it's very important to study this science or this field because of a number of things. Number one, it's never a waste of time. Meaning, to study anything in Islam is never a waste of time. Because it could never be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are teaching something that is insignificant and is impractical and of no use whatsoever. So that's the first thing that we know is a given. There's absolutely no way that Allah and His Messenger ﷺ will teach us something that is a waste of time and of no benefit. So anything the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, mentioned, anything Allah mentions in the Quran is definitely of great benefit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have mentioned it. You could even study something that, let's say, is not it's not something that you're currently involved with. For example, you might study a branch of fiqh that you might not even have to use that knowledge. So then what's the value of that? What's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is, in general, whatever you acquire of Islamic knowledge is good for you, and it shows how Allah has honored you, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "May yuridillahu bihi khayran," whoever Allah intends good for them, what does Allah do for them? يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. He gives him knowledge, fiqh, understanding of the religion. So even if it's something that you won't use, it's still beneficial to know of the religion of Allah. But this is something that is very practical. We're talking about the signs before the hour. Now, so that's one thing. It's never a waste of time. Number two, we live in those times, right? I mean, we kind of live in those times. We see a lot of the signs taking place and manifesting every single day. So we're in those times. So it's weird to live in this time and say, oh, we don't need to study this stuff. I mean, it's interesting how the companions would be interested and they would learn about things towards the end of days, and they're not in the end of days. According to some scholars, we live in the times of the Dajjal. I mean, there are some legitimate Islamic scholars who think we live in the Dajjal might show up in our lifetime. Alright? And most of the signs for his emergence are there. Some scholars think that these are all speculations, nothing, don't be scared or anything. But some think that the Dajjal might show up in the time of our children. If not in our generation, and in the time of our children, or maybe our grandchildren. Because they argue that almost all the signs for his emergence are there, except for just one or two. And those could come during our time, and he could show up, or they could come in the time of our children, and so on. Okay, why am I going into that? Not to scare you, for sure. Okay, partly to scare. But to show the need to learn so that we can teach our children. So if it happens in their lifetime or our grandchildren's lifetime, they know this information. Okay, let's take an example. When the Dajjal comes, 3 years before the Dajjal comes, Allah will command the sky or the clouds to withhold 1/3 of the rain, and the earth to withhold 1/3 of its vegetation. In the second year, Allah will command the sky or the heavens to withhold 2/3 of the rain, and the earth to withhold 2/3 of the vegetation. In the third year, Allah will command the sky to withhold all of its rain, and the Prophet said, so it will not rain a single drop of rain. And on all this earth, not one drop will fall from the sky. And the earth to withhold all of its vegetation. So not a single plant will grow. and that will cause the hoofed animals, the majority of the hoofed animals, to die, meaning like sheep and goats and so on and so forth, and cows, and the majority of them will die except for what Allah wills, meaning very few will remain. And then there will be starvation, so there's no water and there's no food. So then the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, how will people survive at this time? And the Prophet ﷺ said through takbir and tahleel and tahmeed. So saying Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, that will bring nutrients into your blood and you will live off of these words. Now, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, Ibn Kathir says, this is the importance of teaching this, of learning this and teaching it to your children. And they teach it to their children so that when they live at this time, they know how to eat. I mean, are you telling me that anyone on this planet would think that, well, the only way for me to get nutrition now is to say Allahu Akbar, to speak and say Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah? No one would ever think of that. How would anybody know at that time that I can get nutrients into my body by speaking these words? You would never know that. You would never guess that. So that's why it's so important to learn this, so that if it comes during your time or the time of your children or whatever of the generations that will go or come later on, that they will know how to survive when they encounter these times. The other thing, again another example from the Dajjal, is that there will be a young man brimming with youth, as the Prophet ﷺ described in the hadith. And the Dajjal will cut him in half, and he will walk between the two halves, like he's going to clearly walk between the two halves of this person. Then he's going to put them back together. When he puts them back together, this young boy, he will be smiling. Big smile. And he will say to him, now I am sure that you're the Dajjal. So the question is, how is he sure that this is the Dajjal? Because he read the hadith. That's how he knows. He knows in the hadith that the Dajjal will take a young man, cut him in half, walk between the halves, put him back together. So when it happens to him, he realizes he's the young man from that hadith. And that's why he's smiling. So how did he know? Because he knows the hadith. So further evidence to the importance of studying the signs before the Day of Judgment. And if you were to contemplate how people are going to follow the Dajjal, despite clear signs and descriptions given by the Prophet ﷺ. Yani, for example, the Prophet ﷺ describes, and many hadith in Bukhari and Muslim go into the description of the eye of the Dajjal and the face of the Dajjal. Yani, for Allah's sake, it says kafir on his forehead. And how can people think it's God? It says kafir on his forehead. His right eye is like a burst grape in one description. Another hadith describes that it's dangling over his cheek. Another hadith in Sahih Muslim describes that it's his right eye. So we even know which one it is. Not the left, the right eye. And how it looks and what's written on his forehead. And despite all this, how many people are going to follow the Dajjal? With all these clear signs. And the scholars mention that Allah left that big sign of his eye dangling over his cheek, so that you would say, obviously he can't be God. If he's God, fix your own eye. Fix your own eye for God. So, despite all these clear signs, people are still going to follow him. Here's the question. What if we didn't have any of this information? How many more people would follow him? Tons more would follow him. So even with the signs, with the details, and still people are going to fall into these mistakes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us and our children from that. Okay. So the other thing is that we live at a time, as you all realize, as we alluded to in the beginning, where we're all surrounded by many of the minor signs of the Day of Judgment. They're all around us. Get it? All around us? Okay. So it's mainly, we're saying that it's something that's already affecting us, and something that we're already living in. So how could we not learn about it? It's very, very important.
A world of knowledge awaits you. Enroll now at almaghrib.org.